just a little bit of information about my background. And just like a lot of you here who are attending the presentation today or the webinar today, about 15 years ago, I aspired to study, or maybe 15, 16 years ago, I actually aspired to go to the US to do my higher education. However, just like a lot of you, I was very conservative with my thoughts in terms of how do I fund myself, because I did not have too much funds to spend for my higher education. So which means I had a limited budget and I was just exploring universities that would fit my budget. So with that being said, I was in the same boat as you guys were, or you guys are. So, and then eventually I did my shortlist in terms of universities that fit my budget. And I always made sure that I looked up the accredited institutions in the US. And as we talk about accreditation, which is very important, as you look up a lot of universities, if all of you know, there are 4,500 accredited institutions in the US, and there are a lot more that are not accredited. So which means please do not try to shortlist any such universities that is not accredited. So speaking of accreditation, even though it's slightly off the topic, I am going to type the name of the website that you can use to check the accreditation status for all your shortlisting purposes. Okay, I just pinged that on the chat box for you guys so you can take a look at it. So long story short, I eventually ended up going to Missouri State University, which is my alma mater, to pursue my master's in business administration. And while I was doing that, I actually got graduate assistantship. So my MBA actually ended up being a free ride. So while I was doing that, I also had an opportunity to pursue my Master's of Science in Project Management. So I actually did both my MS and MBA at the same time. While I was doing that, I've had the privileges of working through internships in CPT, OPT, H1, and so on and so forth, until I actually returned back to India and worked for big brands like Amazon. And my previous job just before Governor State University is a very special role for me, because I used to work in the US consulate, which is where a lot of you probably would be going in for your visa interviews. I actually worked in the US consulate in Chennai as the senior education advisor. So typically assisting students with wherever they want to go to in the US and guiding them through the application process until pre-departure orientation. So apart from the topic today that we're going to talk about, if you have any questions about anything now or later, feel free to contact me and I'm more than happy to guide you through the next steps. So without any further delay, I am going to just begin the presentation. Once again, welcome all for the presentation today. What I am going to be covering is the following topics, which is on understanding the cost of attendance, types of financial assistance, how do you identify some of the sources of funding apart from whatever you can manage to pay for your college, apart from other scholarships that you may get from the university. There are a lot more things that you can also look into to cover your funding. And what are some of the financial documents that you can show, and what are some of the documents that you cannot show? And for those who are just starting the process, a lot of you may be aware of an I-20, some of you may not be aware of an I-20. I'll also show you a little bit of information and picture of an I-20 if anybody has not seen that before. All right, so moving on to the first slide. The first and foremost thing is to be able to figure out how much is it going to cost for your US higher education, right? Everybody will have their own preferences. Some may want to go to the northeast, some might want to go to the west coast, some might want to go to the down south, while some might even consider going to the Midwest, right? However, each school will have its own cost of attendance. A lot of times we just talk about, hey, how much does it cost to study? And then we assume the university just gives us the entire picture of what it is. And then there is an entire ball game of living expenses, health insurance, and so many other things. So general terminology that is actually used is the cost of attendance. So any website that you're going to look up to, any university, be it private or public, go try looking up information that says cost of attendance, because this is going to give you the overall information. So this is going to include the combination of tuition fees and living expenses. So what will the tuition fees cover? It covers pretty much everything from the instruction fee, the facilities, library costs, lab equipment, exam fee, and anything like that. And then what does the living expenses cover? It covers typically all the other things outside of tuition fee, which means most of this living expenses is something that's going to it's something that you will incur on your own self, which means the room, the board, food, utilities, transportation, health insurance, right? So your I-20, which we will eventually see down the line, is going to indicate the cost of attendance, okay? And that includes the tuition fees and the living expenses. So just a short note, the cost of attendance typically varies by the school type. If it's private, it's slightly expensive, or if it's public, then it might be slightly more affordable. It depends on the location, the program that you might be taking, and the general range kind of starts from $25,000 and it goes upwards depending on all these other factors that we just talked about. I just thought I'll show you a little bit of a snapshot of what a typical cost of attendance looks like. Sometimes you may not see all of this printed on the I-20. Instead, you might just see what it says is the tuition and fees. And then you might have another line item that says living expenses. And sometimes you might also have a line item that says health insurance, or sometimes this health insurance is already factored into the living expenses. So end of the day, when you are going for a visa, for your visa interview, whatever is the total that's mentioned on your I-20, that's the funds that you should be prepared for. So just to reiterate, right, I know there is a lot of myth out there for aspirants. How much should I show as I prepare to go for my visa interview? Should I show 1.5 times, or should I show 1.6 times, 2 times, or what is it? The answer is you just show whatever is equal to what's mentioned or printed on your I-20. Now that is the answer. And trust me, having worked in the US consulate, these are some of the information that the officer actually expects out of you. And a lot of times people just take 2 times, 3 times, and big amounts. That kind of actually throws the officer off. Wait a second. When the university is asked you only for, like, let's say 100,000 or maybe $50,000, and if you're going to go and show like $150,000, $200,000, you're not even expected to show. So please be prepared. As long as you can show whatever is required for that 9-month period, or the 11th or 12-month period that's mentioned on your I-20, then that's good enough. What I'm going to do is, I see there's already some questions that's popping up. What I'm going to do is, you're more than welcome to leave the questions, and I will take all of those questions towards the end. So I'll make sure that I'm not overshooting the time that's given to me. Moving on to the next slide, right? So the first and foremost thing is, how can somebody get a free ride? Fortunately enough, I had a free ride to do my master's. And it is a dream for everybody to get a free ride if they can get one. So quickly, even though this sounds very generic, which means, hey, as long as you're a smart cookie, then there is a good chance that you might get a free ride. So what does the university typically look at, right? The items that's in front of you, it's pretty much everybody knows, hey, yeah, this is something that I know. So what do they look for in each of this item? Here is the secret. There is nothing that's written in stone that cannot change. So which means last year, if somebody has gotten a scholarship for scoring 95% or a 330 plus in GRE, that doesn't mean the same applies this year. End of the day, it depends on the pool of applicants that apply with you or for that intake, right? How are you different from rest of the crowd? That's going to differentiate between you and the others in getting the scholarship or the financial assistance that you're looking for. However, a university will not make a decision or will not make a decision to award a scholarship based on just your GRE score or maybe just your overall or just your academic scores in your engineering or your undergrad or in your high school. That's not the only thing. They are going to look at your profile holistically. When I mean holistically, they are going to look at your profile. They're going to look at your academics. Number one, that's the most important thing. They're going to, if there's anybody who is applying for your bachelor's degree in the US or getting ready to apply, then they are going to look at your ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th. They want to see consistency. If somebody is going to apply for their master's degree, then they're going to look at your bachelor's degree semester wise, first year, second year, third year, fourth year, because every institution wants to make sure that they're choosing the right candidate, because they do not want the candidate to come over to the school and fail. So they are going to, number one, look at your consistency in performance. Number two, what kind of credibility that you bring to the table in terms of your scores, be it your TOEFL or IELTS or PTE, or be it your other tests that you might have taken or may have to take, like GRE or GMAT, or like, let's say, SAT, ACT for those who are thinking about bachelor's degree. And if somebody has taken some subject tests, like GRE subject tests or SAT subject tests or whatever it is, then there is going to be some component in terms of weightage that's going to be taken for that. And your statement of purpose or the essays that you would have to write, right? One of the things, even though I'm going to be again derailing slightly from the conversation, is a lot of people just generally talk about their successes in the SOP or in the essay. Guys, let's be very honest. It's just so boring. I've reviewed a lot of applications. I've seen a lot of essays as part of my tenure with the Education USA, the US consulate, and as part of the university here, right? Yeah, great. You've had a great, successful life. Great. But if you've ever had a failure in your life, please talk about that and how you overcame that, because that is going to make it a lot more interesting, right? I'm sure everybody would have had some failures in their life and how you probably overcame that, right? So these are some of the tips how you can differentiate yourself from the rest of the crowd, right? And certainly strong recommendation letters from your professors and your class teachers and whoever it is. Once again, here is another tip or a secret. It does not matter if your recommender has a PhD or has the highest degree or has the or does not have the highest degree. It does not matter. End of the day, it just boils down to what is the content in that letter, right? It can be a simple professor that does not even have a master's degree that could have taught you. But as long as that letter is so unique and crisp that talks every single detail about you, then that is a great letter. So end of the day, the recommendation letter is all about you and not really about the credibility of the professor. Sometimes the professors could have probably taught you, but by the time you're probably getting a recommendation letter, the professor would have probably changed and moved to a different college or a university or a school. You could still get a letter from them. That is still fine. Okay. And I know I also already talked about the standardized test score. And the last piece is very important piece, correspondence with faculty. A lot of people, a lot of people assume once they get admitted, they probably could apply for these scholarships, and then they expect probably if they get lucky, they might get it. But in that process, you should be also realistic. Most of these scholarships, by the time you can even apply, somebody's already applied, because some of the current students who are already there could have even taken the scholarship or must be in the process of getting the scholarship. It's okay. That's not the end of the world, guys. But always try to have a conversation with the faculty or the hiring manager in those departments and keep that relationship going. If you don't get a scholarship in the first semester, it is not the end of the world. You can always get the scholarship or assistance in the second semester or even the third semester, which is fine. Okay. So quickly, I'm going to touch about the types of financial assistance. Um, Typically, there are fellowships and there are assistantships, as everybody know. The difference between the fellowship and the assistantships is There's no service component. When I mean no service component for fellowships, you don't really have to put in X number of hours working for that faculty or that professor or for that department. If you get awarded a fellowship, you got awarded a fellowship because you probably really did well, or maybe in your past your entire background looks phenomenal, which is why they just gave you that scholarship, and you can enjoy that funds because it's typically given in terms of paying for your college fee partially or fully. So which means it primarily boils down to your merit and the strength of the application. In a lot of times, the fellowships cover 100% of your tuition, and sometimes it might even cover your entire health insurance. All that you have to take care of is your living expenses. Now let's talk about different types of financial or assistantships. Typically, just like everybody knows, there are three types of assistantship. One is the graduate assistantship, which is called as the GA, and then there's something called as RA, which is the research assistantship, and then there is something called as TA, which is the teaching assistantship. The primary difference between all these things are, as the name itself says. But before I go to GA, I'm going to quickly talk about research assistantships, which is RA and TA. As the name itself says, it's very simple and straightforward. If you get awarded a research assistantship, then you pretty much will be doing a research work under a professor in the field that is in line with you or the professor. And these research work can be added to your thesis, or whenever you're just planning to showcase when you're applying for your internships or job interviews and things like that, right? So how do you apply for some of these research assistantships? Typically, when you get admitted to a school, you're going to have to figure out if the department has research assistantship positions, and then you understand what is required for those positions. Primarily, everybody is going to expect a good English proficiency score, because the most important thing is you're going to have to be able to communicate well. And then what kind of research experience do you bring to the table? So I'll move to the next assistantship, which is the teaching assistantship, and then I'll come back to GA. So teaching assistantship, as the name itself says, you will be teaching lower grade classes for a professor in a department. So let's say if you're going to be pursuing computer science, and then there is a teaching assistantship position under a professor, you typically apply for that position. And some of the things that they may look at is typically, of course, a good speaking score in TOEFL or IELTS or in PTE, because a lot of times when you teach classes, you're going to have to be able to talk well or speak well, which is why they look at your speaking scores. And once you get this assistantship, then the professor will give you chances where you supervise undergraduate labs or class. Typically, it will be some of the basic programming classes that you might be teaching that may not really require high skill set for the professor to be in that class full time, right? And I'll come back to the GA now. GA sounds very generic. Sometimes it's referred to as graduate assistantship, sometimes referred to as administrative assistantships. So it might be a little confusing. So what do you do as part of GA or AA? The secret here is you pretty much do very generic, sometimes even clerical things, for which you might even think, wait a second, does the department give me funding to do this kind of positions or this kind of jobs? Yes. Sometimes the position will be so simple that it does not require any specific skill set. It can be just you designing some basic reports, or working some Excel generating reports, or you doing some presentation work for the department all throughout the year, for which the department can actually give you funding, right? In my opinion, even though RA and TA sound really a lot more heavy, I've been a GA myself when I used to be at Missouri State, and it was really difficult to get these GA positions, because everybody wants to apply for it, because there's no specific skill set that they're going to ask. Anybody even from different background can apply for GA, as long as the job description mentioned for these roles are very generic. It can be simple as just answering phone calls, responding to emails, creating some reports, meeting with people who come into that department, and then helping with some basic chores for your supervisor or for the department. Okay, so when you get these assistantships, the best thing is Sometimes it's going to cover for your entire tuition fee, or sometimes it can cover for your part of your tuition fee, or sometimes it can just help you convert from an outstate to an in-state tuition fee. However, it depends on the university or the colleges that you're applying to. Okay. So let's say if somebody is not really fortunate enough to get these assistantships, then what's the next best way to fund their education? Typically on-campus jobs, which is frequently referred to as the part-time jobs. And there are several types of part-time jobs again. Sometimes there are work-study jobs that are primarily offered only to US citizens or permanent residents. If you're not one among them, then you may not be able to apply for some of these work-study jobs, which is available in almost all the universities. However, as an international student, anybody could do part-time jobs as long as it's only within the university. If you end up working in a part-time job outside the university, then it becomes illegal. Then you could also be deported if you get into that situation. So what do you mean by part-time jobs? Typically part-time jobs, as it means, you could be doing any kind of job in any department. Let's say there can be a sports center that could probably be looking for somebody to sell tickets in front of sitting in the counter. So all that you have to do is just be able to communicate, and then they tell you what's expected out of you. You apply for the job, and then you get it, and then you work. You could work up to 20 hours a week when the college is in session. When I mean that when the college is in session. So during your academic term, when you do not have breaks, breaks like the summer break or the winter break or the fall or the spring break, you could only work up to 20 hours per week. During some of the breaks, you could work up to 40 hours per week. So how do they pay these? I mean, and how much does it, how much can each of you make when you do these part-time jobs? It differs from university to university, location to location, job to job, responsibility to responsibility, right? But predominantly, every university will pay what is the minimum wage that is set by that state. So you would at least make that dollar amount or higher, right? So how do you find out what's the minimum wage for that state? You can just Google, and then you will be able to find out what's the minimum wage for each of that state. Okay. So, so like I talked about, there are assistantships and then there are part-time jobs, right? Those are some of the ways how most of you would be able to fund your education. Now, we can go one step further where we can talk about internships. Please remember, a lot of people only think only after you graduate from your university you can start working full-time outside the campus. But a lot of people forget the fact that there is something called as CPT, which is the curricular practical training. So that is a period that's given to all international students who are eligible and who maintain a grade that is set forth by the university, where they could use this period to gain practical hands-on experience. And during this period, if you get a job that's willing to pay you, then great, you get to also make money. So, which is typically in the form of internship. So let's say if somebody is going for their bachelor's degree, then the only caveat here is you should have at least completed 2 full semesters in the university that you're studying. So which means at least 9 months of study that you should have completed at this university, and then you can go work on your internship. Some universities may call it internship, some university may call it co-ops, which is already designed as part of their curriculum, where the student itself goes through the phase of where they will find an employer to work under and make money, or maybe may not make money, but that will give them the practical hands-on experience. For those who are probably aspiring to go for do your master's degree, even though master's degree is only for 2 years, please remember these internships you can even do for up to 1 full year, maybe up to 11 months and 29 days to be specific. The minute you exceed that, it's going to eat into your OPT period, which comes after your graduation date. So one of the secrets or the tips that I'm going to give you here is, whichever university or whatever program that you end up doing, please try to do some kind of internships before you graduate, because you have no idea how much weightage it carries on your profile. And one of the most important things is, please always remember, don't just get carried away by looking for only paid internships? Let's look at it this way. Even though as part of unpaid internships, you may not be making the money that others would be making through paid internships, but look at it this way. As an employer, when somebody is going to look at your profile and when they're going to ask you, oh, so you did an internship during your coursework. So tell me a little bit about your internship. You can tell them, hey, I did an unpaid internship and I learned so these things. And it is going to create a lot of positive impact on that person who's interviewing you, because it shows that you, even though it was an unpaid internship, you still took it and then you still worked for it. So which means if they were to hire you, then you would be doing a lot more phenomenal things for them, right? So look at it that way. I'm not going to talk any further about internships. As everybody know, it gives you a great opportunity to make money and get the hands-on experience in your field of study. Now let's talk about what are the sources of funding, right? Everybody predominantly will be looking at funding from your parents or your family, right? Or you may have funding that somebody or your parents have probably been saving for your own education needs in your own accounts, then which is great. For, let's say, people who may not really have enough funds to be able to support their own education, either be it through parents or family members, there are financial aids. When I mean financial aids, again, so what is this? Is it relevant to financial assistance like the assistantships or the fellowships or the part-time jobs? No, this is completely different. Some universities do offer financial aids that are open for international students. There are some universities that actually have specific financial assistance or aids or scholarships that are for even explicitly for Indian students. So the word financial aid, financial assistance, scholarship, I'm going to be using it interchangeably here, so don't get confused. And some of these scholarships are categorized into need-based or merit-based. However, the need-based predominantly comes only at the undergraduate or the bachelor's degree level. So if you are aspiring to do your master's degree, then some of these scholarships may not be applicable. But if you are aspiring to study bachelor's degree in the US, please go explore within the university websites to see if there are any need-based scholarships that you can apply for. So apart from whatever the universities could offer, if you guys did not know, there are so many agencies and foundations that offer scholarships for students going abroad to whichever country that you might be going to. A lot of times people as well go to US, then yeah, there are scholarships and agencies and foundations. So how do you find out what are these agencies and foundations that offer these scholarship? Please go to the website USIEF, which is the United States India Educational Foundation, and you can go look up the closest center which is near to wherever you are, and there will be email IDs, because this is typically the United States India Educational Foundation is a binational organization that's set up jointly between the US and the Indian government that maintains a list of these scholarships that are offered by various agencies and foundations. But please note, they only have this as an information, but they're not really attesting that these foundations they may have their own requirements. So it's your responsibility to go one step further to look up what are the requirements. But certainly you can go up to the website to get the details of the email IDs. But if not, you can always ping me or text me. I'm happy to guide you through where you can get these details. If you are a sports person, then there are sports scholarships available at the universities. I'm sure you can also look that information up. And lastly, there are religious organizations that offer scholarship. It's about you just going to Google and then digging this information out, because a lot of times you'll be just so skewed that you're only looking at funding from your parents, your family members, or anything from the university. But there are so many other sources like these sports scholarship, other agencies and foundations or religious organizations offering these scholarships, of course based on some of the requirements which you may have to meet. What is very important is how do you put together these proof of finances? Like I said earlier, you don't really have to worry about how much money that you would have to bring in addition to what's expected out of you. be sure to understand what your cost of attendance is. If your cost of attendance is $37,232, it is okay if you just showed 37,232 in terms of Indian rupee or whichever currency equivalent that you plan on showing. You don't have to show a penny more or a penny less. Of course, if you showed penny less, then of course you're going to get into more questions. But my explanation here is you don't really have to show 1.5 times or 2 times or whatever it is. So putting together your proof of finances is a joint effort. A lot of times students kind of try to scramble some information based on whatever they hear partially from the parents or from their family members. But please note, it is a joint effort. What do I mean by this? When you're going for your visa interview, one of the questions that they're going to be, one of the situations they're going to be assessing you is, do you have enough financial or do you have enough funding to pay for your education, right? So which means as part of that, they're going to try and assess who is your sponsor, what does a sponsor do, and how much do they make, what kind of job do they do you have siblings. Why are they asking all these questions? Just to see if there was X amount of savings, let's say 25 lakhs in savings, and your college expenses about 25 lakhs. If this entire savings is going to just come for you, then what is the family going to do for to support themselves? Or does the sponsor make enough money to still keep the family going, right? These are some of the things that are going to be assessed, which is why it is a joint effort between you and your family or your parents to understand where is this funding coming from as you prepare to financial studies. Because US government requires all students to show that they have enough funds to pay for their college. As part of your admission process, all universities are typically going to evaluate two aspects. Number one, do you have enough, are you really good in your academic background, and do you have enough money to pay for your education? If at all you don't qualify for any scholarships. These are two things that they're going to evaluate before they can give you an admission. And only after they look at it, they're going to send you what's called as an I-20. We will quickly go to that in a little bit. And what is an I-20? The clear definition is it is a certificate of eligibility on non-immigrant student status. In simple words, if I have to say, it's probably a little more than your admission letter. What I generally say is I-20 is your Bible. You need to know everything about your I-20, what's mentioned in it, because the first and the foremost thing that the visa officer is going to ask you is your I-20 and your passport. Okay, so when you are accepted, let's say when you get an admission in the school of your choice, what you're going to receive is what's called the I-20. Typically I-20 can be 1 to 2 pages long, and the general expectation is please get I-20s. Let's say if you're going to apply to 5 schools and you get admitted to 3 of them, then yes, it's okay. It's only a handful of them. You can get your I-20s from all 3 of them, and then you can make a decision on which works better for you. Sometimes some students think, okay, I might have to get admission I-20s from all of them because somebody is going to ask me during the visa interview that, hey, show me your I-20, right? They're not going to ask you, show me all your I-20s. They're going to ask you maybe how many universities did you apply to and how many admits did you have or did you receive. So if you've already made up your mind which is where is your top choice, you may probably collect some more I-20s just to make that decision. But if you apply to 10 or 15 universities, it's not really needed that you have to collect I-20s from all of them. Okay. All right. So if you're not, I'm not sure how clearly you're able to see this, but you can always Google for sample I-20s. You should be able to see it. Like I said, I-20 is a Bible, okay? And it has all the basic information which you need to know. Typically, the information is on the left side that I'm showing to you. It has your full name. It has your university's name. It has the name of your school official who's probably signed it or who processed your I-20. It has information about your CVIS ID, which is a unique ID that's assigned to you whenever you get an I-20 from a specific school. And there are other things that you might probably eventually learn about as you go through the process. Okay, So I just thought I'll throw this picture here for you to understand a little bit more about the I-20. But if you're not able to see this clearly, or if you have more questions, I'll probably take it during the questions. All right. So proof of financial evidence, right? So typically your financial should cover you for one entire year at least. And why do they ask you to show only for one entire year when your program could be for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or even longer than that, right? The general expectation is you should have enough funds in liquid form, which means savings or fixed deposit or whatever it is. We'll talk about that in the next slide. At least to cover you for the first year. And then if at all you're asked during the interview, you should have a plan to explain how do you or your family is going to support you for the second year or for the rest of the program. So let's say if your cost of attendance is $50,000 and then you have been granted a $5,000 scholarship, which means it's good enough that you showed that you have enough funding for the remaining $45,000. If you have more than that, great, but you don't have to worry if you do not have anything more than just that $45,000. Okay. And one of the most important things is if the funds is not in your name, if it's not in your bank account, what you would have to do is you would have to, if you're getting your financial documents from your sponsor, then what you would also have to attach is an affidavit of support. It's typically a piece of document that says the sponsor is willing to sponsor your education and how is he or she related to you. And once again, different universities have different formats. Not all the universities may ask you in a stamp paper and attest it. At the same time, not all universities may have a simple format. So please check with the universities that you are getting ready to apply or have you already applied. Okay. So some information about the financial documents is some of these documents should not be older than 6 months. It's good to keep it between the 3 to 6 months, or sometimes the university will specify what is their expectation in terms of these financial documents. And a lot of times people think, okay, wait a second, I also always have to get a letter from the bank to show that there is enough funds. That may not be always the case. Even a simple bank savings account statement or a fixed deposit receipt is still good enough as long as you can attach an affidavit of support in case it's not in your name. So do not get freaked out if your bank is not giving you a letter. Even if a simple savings account statement or a fixed deposit receipt is good enough, as long as it is in English. Some of the financial documents that are accepted is your checkings account or the savings account. In the US, there is something called a checkings account, but if you're an Indian, then the savings account you can show, or fixed deposit, government bonds that are maturing before you can start your first term at the university. Let's say if you have a government bond that's maturing only 5 years down the line, what's the point of showing that? Because you may not be able to liquidate that funds. So if you have a demat account, you can also show that. But once again, please remember, some universities are very specific on what kind of formats or what kind of accounts that they want to see. Not all of them may accept all of these. Some may say only savings account or fixed deposits or an education loans, but while others may not really have any specific terms or clause. Some universities may even accept Kisan Vikas Patra and other things, or any unconditional scholarship letters issued by other organizations. Some of the documents that are not accepted is salary slips or payroll statements, tax returns. Please note, tax returns good to carry with you for your visa interview, but that's not your financial, that's not a proof of your financial evidence, okay? Because tax returns typically shows what did you make the previous year or what did the person make the previous year, which means the money could have been long spent. And any provisional conditional education loans will not be considered retirement funds and other things that's as listed above. A lot of times people think, hey, talking about the property worth or the worth of the property that they or their parents or their family owns, they think will satisfy the officer. Please note, the officer or the university is typically looking at you submitting evidence of funds in liquid format and not in immobile properties. Okay, it's always good to say, hey, apart from the liquid funds of 35, 40 lakhs that I have or my family has, I also have this as my other properties. Okay, but that cannot become your primary source of funding. Okay, I think that kind of gets me to the last slide. But before I wrap up and take questions, I'm going to quickly take 2 minutes or 3 minutes here to talk about the university that I work for, which is Governor State University, which is located just outside Chicago. If there is anyone who is looking for an affordable education at a US university, then we are one of the most affordable US university, especially in Illinois or in the Chicago area, because our college fee, as listed above, is approximately $15,000 per academic year. And we give application fee waivers and best evaluation waivers. If you are interested in applying for the spring intake or subsequent intakes, you're more than welcome to get in touch with me. One of the most important thing, or the beautiful thing about GSU, is we offer an on-campus housing scholarship, which means if you decide to live on campus at GSU, and there are scholarships available which can cover you up to 1 full year of not having to pay anything to live on our campus housing. So you can ping me or write to me or WhatsApp me after this presentation about how you can even apply for these scholarships. It's a pretty straightforward. It is not rocket science. You apply to GSU, and if you apply early for these scholarships, we just give it like that. There is no terms or conditions like merit-based or need-based, nothing attached. The beauty of GSU is you can pay the fee in installments, which means you can pay the fee in monthly basis throughout the semester. Okay, and if you're an undergrad, then we also we give college credit for your IB or AP test. And the most beautiful thing again is we don't have a deadline. We do it on a rolling basis. So which means you can, if you are too close to the intake, then we will process your application for the subsequent intake. Here is a little bit of information in terms of a tuition chart comparison. As you can see, GSU is the blue line. For the last 10 years, we've consistently maintained ourselves as the most affordable university in the state of Illinois, especially in the Chicago area, compared to all our other public and private universities.